pre-show quid pro quo. Andre, you get one question. It can be any question in the world. It can be what is my favorite vegetable? Who's my favorite character on The Simpsons? It can be whether I eat pasta out of a bowl or on a plate. Any question, go ahead and ask it.
Do you think that there will ever be a From Hell tour? Ever?
In
Just in England, specifically in England. Will there ever be someone you pay money to have a From Hell tour?
There might be now. Now that I've mentioned it on the episode, there very well might be. Yes, I think somebody could make some very good money.
Have you mentioned this before?
I have.
Oh, have you?
I have. Yeah, I mentioned it on the episode. You're a celebrity now, Andre. Yeah. I
Born to be early.
It was Alan Moore episode.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I did the episode on Alan Moore. So yeah, I mentioned that I dragged you all over London for 2 days, just taking buses, not cheating by taking the subway, and we explored, and I just talked about it. And I also mentioned when we arrived in London, we had to go through the customs.
I have a hard time with customs.
And yes, you had a hard time with customs. And
well, he brought us together. What's he bringing us together for? You might as well. I remember him. He's like, yeah, you might as well come too if you're together. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I'm sure he was trying to be nice.
He was, yeah, he certainly was. He was just, he had no retort to, all right, this guy's just talking. I don't know what he's talking about. Stamp, go through. Welcome to London.
Yeah, there you go. Don't bring any peanut butter.
Exactly. Great question, Andre. Love it.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, welcome to What Magic Is This podcast? A podcast that wants to give you a piece of its mind by hoping that you have a little peace of mind. My name is Douglas Batchelor, and in this podcast we're going to be talking about magic, the occult, the esoteric, the paranormal, the supernatural, and the weird. And if you've never listened to the show before, basically what happens is I bring in a guest, I give them a list of about 17 topics beforehand, they get to choose one, then they come on the show, and then we talk about the topic that they've chosen. Sometimes, it might sound like I do a lot of the talking. Try to think of it as sitting in on a tutor session. The tutor does most of the talking, and the student will ask a question every once in a while, but for the most part, it is the tutor doing most of the chatting. I have a very special guest because my guest is Andre, who is my first repeat guest. He first appeared on the show. It was about Discordianism, and that was released on June 10th, which would make this episode the 1-year anniversary episode. So if that's the case, then we must blow a horn. Andre, here's a horn. You get to blow it.
Thank you.
Blow the horn, Andre.
This is like the beginning of a Captain Jazz record.
There we go.
No one's going to know who Captain Jazz is. They should. Anyway.
Perfect. Andre, it is great having you back. You're one of my dearest friends. You're one of the greatest people I've ever met.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah.
No, you're not going to get more likes for that.
No, you really are.
Thank you.
It's wonderful.
I will say, and I said this earlier, that you are my best friend.
Oh,
that says a lot for me. He knows this story. I once told a person when he hit a bar that this person was never my friend or not my friend. Doug was there. I understand the type of people I want in my life.
Right.
Because how many times, everybody who's listening to this knows that, you're going to get burned by someone once in a while. But eventually, you want to have, when people say, oh, how many friends do you have? You don't want to say 10 or 15 or 20.
Right.
You want to say 5 or less. Because that's who you can rely on.
Right.
And I can rely on Doug Batchelor. Without a shadow of a doubt. I didn't even think about it.
Well, thank you so much, Andre.
Can you lend me some money?
Absolutely. How much do you need?
I need $10,000.
Oh, well, perfect. Here's all my Canadian CERB payments. There you go. Andre has chosen a very interesting topic today. He's chosen mental health and the magician, or magic and mental health. And this is going to be a bit of a stranger episode because I don't have any notes to go off of, and I've got nothing planned for this episode. It could go in any direction, so I just thought it would be easier to have a conversation about this kind of thing as opposed to going through all of the nitpicking that one would go through as far as mental health and the occult or magic. I just want to start off with a bit of a disclaimer here, and it's going to be a very important one, guys, so I want everybody to listen, so please listen up, folks. A lot of people are hurting. Most of my life I have, And I want you to know that this episode is only going to be my perspective in how I have dealt with my specific issues with mental health. I might say something that will be so egregious and shocking to you that you will be upset or you will think that I am talking absolute bullshit. Understand that it is coming from somebody who has a very peculiar view on mental health and who has dealt with mental health in his own way. And I just want everybody to realize that what I'm talking about, I don't want people to get upset about, because my mental health has a lot to do with the way that I view the world, with my magic specifically. So I know I'm kind of bouncing up around the place with this disclaimer. I just want you to know that I'm talking from my own personal truth. I hate that expression, speaking my truth, but in this case, it really does apply. I'm speaking from my experiences. So with that, Andre is going to be doing a lot of talking in this episode. We kind of make fun of him in my circle of friends because the very first episode of What Magic Is This, I think he said like 5 words.
Well, in my defense, I sure as hell didn't know where this was going to go. No. You were learning. This is the first one. We're experimenting. You were experimenting, to be more specific. So I was along for the ride, which I think, looking back now, probably was the right choice, because what do I know about anything? Right. I didn't even I have to write my own name down on my hand to remember it. So you know what I mean? Like it's important. I think that as a first episode, I didn't have much to say because I didn't need to say much.
Yeah, you yawned the entire way through.
Oh yeah, I yawned. That's right. I got a problem with my liver.
Can we please mute his mic again? He's yawning. Actually, at that time we were only recording off of one mic, so it was a bit. Yeah. So look how far I've come. I've got a couple of stands and
6 feet apart.
That's right. As we have to be now. I don't know how to begin this except for maybe giving you a bit of a story of my life, and I might forget some stuff that might come back a little bit later. If I do remember it, I'll mention it. So I was a very happy child. People remember me being very imaginative, being very creative, being very happy, smiling all the time. I had a bunch of health issues when I was younger involving asthma. I used to have to spend long periods of time in the hospital in like a tent for croup, which would be aggravated because of my asthma. So long periods of my life when I was younger, I was very ill. Eventually, my dad actually built a croup tent in our house so I could be at home and be monitored by my parents. Something happened, I guess, as I got older. I started showing signs that I was definitely not a happy child. There were certain things that I was doing. My entire disposition changed, and I was starting to wonder what was actually going on. And a lot of it was before I started hitting puberty. It's just, looking back at it now, I realized, and I mentioned this in the imagination episode, it was that things started not having as much meaning to me anymore. I mean, there were other things, but it's just that my imagination started to go away, and things that would have great import to me, a stick could become a magical sword kind of thing. And I think this is something that a lot of people can relate to. It wasn't until the movie Brain Candy by the Kids in the Hall that I was able to actually say that there's a name for what I'm feeling, which is depression. Even before this, sorry if I can just go back a little bit. Apparently, as a child, I was also incredibly anxious about everything. There was a tornado in Edmonton, Alberta, I believe in the mid to late 80s. That was one of the most incredible tornadoes that has ever existed in the history of the world. It was an F4, most probably an F5 tornado it killed, I think, 36 people. It was terrifying. And from that moment on, I always thought that a tornado was going to touch down at some point and kill me. I was scared of death. I was terrified of things happening that would cause my death. And as I mentioned in the Fourth Dimension episode, I would spend long periods of my night not being able to sleep because I would be thinking about the idea of time. And time was intrinsically linked to death and running out of time. Extremely anxious child. This probably fed into my depression. Again, watching Brain Candy movie, it's like, okay, I have a word for what I'm feeling. At one point, there was a diary for sale in where I grew up in Bright Creek, Alberta, and it had a little picture of a cat on a piano, but the cover wasn't interesting to me. What was interesting was that this journal diary had a lock on it. And I bought this thing, and it became my diary, and I would write into it. And I believe I was about 10 years old when I got this. So I'd write things down. I'll come back to the diary in a sec, but my parents noticed that I wasn't doing very well in school. I was getting made fun of a lot. I was acting out in very odd ways. I'll talk about it probably in a different episode, but I was failing at school. I wasn't doing well. I was being made fun of. I was incredibly shy. I was incredibly withdrawn, and I was making stupid decisions. I couldn't learn. Eventually, my parents found a doctor who specialized with children who had attention deficit hyperactive disorder. I actually had to drive an hour outside of where I grew up to another small town to visit this doctor. And he did some analyses on me, and he basically said the obvious. Your child doesn't just have attention deficit disorder. He has high anxiety. He is most likely somewhere on the bipolar spectrum, if indeed bipolar has a spectrum, and he's definitely severely depressed. This was the 90s, so the 90s was very good at diagnosing things that we didn't really know exactly what they were, and the best thing that they would do for you was to give you drugs. It's not up for debate, it's just what we did. We just, something's wrong with your child, he's not normal, here's some drugs for him. The doctor eventually brought me into a room where it was just him and I talking, and he showed me these charts, and it had little pictures of what goes on inside your brain. And he showed me these little things, and they looked like, I don't know, little clubs. And he said, look, this club and this club, there's these receptors that go in between them. And some people's receptors, there's not enough of them, or they just don't interact enough. So what we have to do is that we have to give you these drugs to help you to balance things a little bit more. So I believe I was between 12 and 13. I was prescribed Zoloft and Dexedrine to help with depression and to help with ADHD. They worked great. My first year of school I had to switch schools, actually. I forgot to mention that. I had to switch schools for children with learning disabilities, so I was put in a new school. And I did very well for the very first year. The drugs were certainly working. I was somewhat successful. I won an award that year for most outstanding student. I was also an actor, so I was in plays and I was in movies, a short film, and I was definitely doing a lot better. I also was seeing a psychiatrist at the time, a very great man who I don't talk to very much anymore, but he was very good at helping me cope with what I was going through. I had somebody to talk to. When I was about 15 years old, I realized that my journal went missing, my diary went missing, and I had no idea where it was. And eventually, I found it, and my mother had kept it, and I decided to flip through it. And this was a little bit later on, but again, this was my journal from the age of about 10 to the age of about 14. And I was looking through it, and every day, because I would do it every day would, for a period, when I first started the journal, it was like all the things, what a 10-year-old has to talk about. By the time 11 and 12 came on, it would literally just be the word depressed or suicidal or entries about how I wanted to hurt myself. And this was a shock for my 16-year-old self who was on drugs. And I knew that there was something certainly wrong with me. But I was doing okay, and I was working through things, and I was having a lot of help with my psychologist. I was doing okay, though. I didn't do as well the next couple of years in school. I don't know what it was. I think the drugs were not helping me as much as they used to. Then something else came into my life, and in and around the age of 15, I was staying at a friend's place. It was like a cabin outside of where I grew up, and yeah, they were young kids, and we were young kids. What young kids do, we start to drink. 2 nights from before we were supposed to leave, we started drinking, and at one point, the drink interacted with the drugs that I was taking, and I overdosed, and it was a hard overdose, and I was in the middle of nowhere. Eventually, an ambulance had to pick me up. And apparently for a period of time, I stopped breathing, and I was dying. Woke up in the morning, and I was it was an interesting situation. I'll just put it that way. For a period of years, I didn't drink. Numerous things happened as far as drinking. I would be on drugs, and then as in medication, and then I'd go off of them, and then I'd go back on them. I've been on more antidepressants than I think I've at least been over 7 different varieties of medication. But I was starting to medicate myself with alcohol, and tons of things went wrong. I'm not going to go through them, but eventually, about 3 years ago, I quit drinking, and I had to quit drinking. It became a huge problem in my life. I realized at some point that all the bad things that had happened to me from the age of 20 to the age of 34 were because of my drinking. Every single bad thing. And since then, I have been sober, and mental health has been one of those things where I've always had a struggle with it. I still have really bad days, but my days are certainly much better. But I've left out a ton of details, but I've figured out certain things that I can do to help me with my mental health, and some of them do involve magic. I want to put this out here right now, and maybe I should have put this in the disclaimer. There is no spell that you can do, not a single one, that can make your pain go away or your mental issues go away. I want people to realize this right now. There is no magic wand that you can wave that will make it go away. If you're going off of a spirit model, which I do as well, most spirits don't give a fuck about how you feel and what's going on in your head. There might be some, but we'll talk about that in a bit. But I basically laid out my well of experience as far as my mental health is concerned, and I'm not cured in any way, shape, or form. I want people to know that right now. Again, good days and bad days, but I do take things one day at a time, and I am grateful for a lot of the things that I do, and I have my past experiences from which to go off of to realize that I am definitely a lot better than I was. So with that...
I'm interested in when that initial period of when magic came into your life.
Yeah.
Was it during a dark period, or was it a period of kind of intermediate part where you're, coming out of something and then you just exposed to it, or were you always exposed to it?
Well,
I think you've probably talked about this before.
Yeah, I've talked about it on the program before. So I used to have these odd experiences when I was younger. I would see things. We could call them ghosts or we could call them specters, and whether or not that has a tie to my mental health remains to be seen. But I had these very odd experiences. I was a very sensitive child, and so these things would always come up, and I would kind of talk to some of my teachers and drop hints. So some of my teachers were actually very, very helpful. I can think of 3 particular ones, and they would try to steer me with like, hey, you should probably read some Carl Jung, or you should probably read this book Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. But it wasn't until about age 20 when my parents separated that there was this interperiod where I was living with my mother in Calgary, and that was when I watched a DVD called Disinfo Nation, and that's when it hit me. And it was a dark period. It was a very dark period, that period of time. Maybe it's something I should have brought up, is that my parents separated when I was about 19 years old. Definitely should have put this in the earlier discussion. I was debating whether or not I should, but I'm going to tell you now anyways. When I finished high school, I didn't have any post-secondary education lined up. I was doing absolutely nothing, and I was drinking, basically, still, and I was drinking more. No kind of future plans. I had absolutely nothing, and I decided I was going to kill myself again. Purposefully this time, not like before with my friends. I was going to drink alcohol, and I was going to take some pills. I had another diary, a new previous diary. I took that, I put it in front of my door. I made like a shrine to myself for when they open the door and they find my dead body. Things that meant a great deal to me. Albums, books. I think like I had like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, or just like what
Sure.
was interesting to me.
Well, you're 19, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
put it there, and to my great disappointment, I woke up about 12 hours later. It didn't work.
Right.
But my parents' separation, it affected me quite a bit. Looking back at it now, it's kind of like, why was he sad about that? But change has never been one of those things that I've been very good at. Specifically, changes that I have no control over. When I started getting into magic was a period in time where I knew I had to do something. I was working 2 different jobs. I was working at a theater in Calgary, and I was working at a video store in Calgary as well. And I was deciding whether or not I wanted to go to film school. And while working at the video store, that's when the DVD came up, and that's when I started to kind of have these strange experiences. I would have these crazy dreams after watching the Disinfo DVD. And from then on, it was to the races, actually, basically. I was just started doing more and more and more when I wasn't drinking. Let's put it that way.
Right. How much of the drinking was affecting the magic or vice versa?
How much was it
Yeah,
affecting?
like, I mean, did they work off each other for a while? Or
Yeah,
was
they
it,
did. Yeah. I mean...
in a negative way or a positive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, truth be told, in a negative and a positive way. In a way, some of the stuff that I would do would be... I would lie to myself. But basically, I would think that my rituals and my acts would be amplified somehow by the Dionysian splendor of abandon that alcohol gives you. But then the morning after was just like really awful and terrible. But it was one of those things again. And with talking about the last episode I did about the Golden Dawn, that 7 years I was doing Golden Dawn magic. I was also drinking quite a bit. Like at least drinking to get drunk 4 to 5 days a week. Right. Just constantly. I might have had a reason why, I wasn't very good at that kind of magic, but also it was just one of those things where I was using it in lieu of antidepressants. And then for a period of time, they kind of crossed over again, and I can't imagine the horror I did to my body by drinking and being on SSRIs, medicine for depression and anxiety. I don't know how I didn't overdose again, because I would drink to blackout drunk. But I don't know why I didn't clue in earlier. it was odd to me. So
as you have been sober for 3 years, which I can't believe it's been 3 years, which is crazy, but and amazing. Because I remember when you told me, we went out for sushi.
We did,
and I famously I don't do drugs, alcohol. I'm straight edge to the purest form of that through the music, etc. I'm clueless to other people's addictions in some ways. If it's not right in my face, then I don't see it.
I was very good at hiding at that point.
Yeah, very good. And I didn't realize that one could, because maybe naively, I grew up on, well, that guy's I was always surrounded by, I had an alcoholic roommate in at University of Western Ontario who one morning, he would blackout drunk, be in ditches, and he was brag about it in some weird way, because maybe you could enlighten me more later about why someone would brag about that. But he once picked me up as I slept and threw me against the wall.
Lovely.
And he's a little guy. And when you told me that, I was genuinely surprised.
Right.
And felt very lucky that you would be brave enough to tell me that. So I
had to talk to somebody.
Yeah, and it took, and to be selfish about it, it took me some time to digest that, because I didn't know as a friend how to fit myself into that, whether I should, whether I shouldn't, right? Because it's my business, but not my business.
Right.
It's amazing it's 3 years, and I sometimes forget that you ever had a problem, right?
Right.
As a friend,
right?
Which could be dangerous, because you always want to check in on your friends and see how they are, especially now. For a big part of me, I trust you to do the right thing. Like, I have I have addictions. I'm head to toe in tattoos, but I don't. I don't know. I'm not going to analyze it, because I don't know. I don't know if it's the same stuff that's going on in my brain as it would be in your brain in terms of alcohol. But what I do know is that we all have our addictions. But in terms of this, it was killing you. And it clearly was. But it also at the same time opened you up to magic. And what I was going to ask you was, the magic you do now.
Right.
What is the biggest change? What do you see? I understand you're more mature now. Right. And 3 years is 3 years, but you're also more mature than you were when you were 19, 20, obviously.
Very much so, yeah.
So, how you see things. So, maybe it's a two-part question. Does how you conduct magic or make magic or do magic affect through your age or your experience, and also the difference between how it would be when you were on alcohol and not?
It's both, really. The one thing that I'm doing very much differently now that I'm not hungover every morning is that my rituals are definitely regimented. Like every morning I get up, I do a ritual and setting the state for the day that I'm going to have. But when I was my Dionysian whatever, it was just like whenever I felt like I had time, I'll just do it anyway. But
Nowadays,
yeah.
what's the biggest change that you feel in terms of when you...
The stuff that I do is, I'll use the word effective, but it's seemingly more infused with meaning and
clarity?
Much.
Okay.
Yeah, much. Things are much clearer, and that doesn't just come from being a sober person, right?
As a layman,
Yeah.
to both of the things you're talking about,
Right.
I would think that, I guess if you had asked me this question in a different context, I think I would think that because magic seems to be very powerful, it would be able to cut through the fog of whatever substance you may be on, but that's not the case.
For some people, I've heard that they might be lying, but for some of them, they said like I'm able to I'm able to see the true will of my purpose, and it doesn't involve alcohol. But I think that the idea of working with, because a lot of magic is working with altered states of consciousness. One of the best ways of doing that is fucking yourself up. Right. And that might sound negative, like fucking yourself up with like mushrooms and things like that. I mean that what we are doing is basically sometimes in deep ritual or deep ceremony, whatever you want to call it, you're trying to get yourself into a different mind space for certain things to happen or certain things to come through, or to be able to have some kind of psychometry or whole body feeling. And one of the ways you can do that is smoke weed, drink alcohol, that kind of stuff.
So the ayahuasca and other those type of hallucinogenics, is that magic or is that
absolutely
just... Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. When you go to do ayahuasca, you're not just, if you go to places like Peru or Central America, it's a process. It's a day-long process. They size you up. They look at how you're dealing with things. There's somebody who actually portions the amount of ayahuasca that you drink. There's people to help you, to talk you through with what you're going through. It is an actual like magical ceremony. Like it's some of the most pure ceremonies that you can have. Yes, it's magic pure and simple is really what it is.
Right.
As far as what I think magic can do for people that have some kind of, who have mental issues and struggle with anxiety, depression, this kind of thing, is that without saying that there is any spell that you can do, what magic does, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, and I use this as well with the idea of ritual, is that we were talking about cognitive behavioral therapy. Rituals, if you have them planned as to what you are going to do, and if you do them daily, you are setting yourself up for your behavior to be less of a behavior and more of an intuitive process that you're going through. So what you were doing is you were setting up some kind of a regiment for yourself to be able to call out to the universe, call out to spirits, call out to certain things, and you are creating a plan for yourself that is very conducive to you being a healthier person. Same thing with meditation, etc., etc. I think what we have to realize, and this is the biggest thing, this doesn't just apply to people that are magically or mystically inclined, but specifically with people that are unhappy with their state in the world, or feeling unfulfilled or depressed, or just people who generally feel a darkness. We have to realize that we, at this point in the world and in time, have mechanized how we view the body, but more specifically the brain. We think that there is one symptom or one illness that we can just diagnose, and then there's a pill for that. And I'm not against using medication. If you need to use medication, you need to use medication. But also realize that instead of thinking of your brain and your body as a machine, we have to start thinking about things as if they are an ecosystem. Your problem is not just one thing wrong. There's usually several things that are wrong, and there are usually several solutions to those things. Let's look at an ecosystem. You have an ecosystem, I don't know, a swamp. It looks green, it looks fertile, it looks fantastic. Everything's great. suddenly some things start dying. What is the first thing that you look at? Do you start to look at, well, maybe there's something up the stream that caused it? Is it something within the ecosystem itself? What is going on? I don't think one of the best ways of curing that is by adding something else. It's about investigating what is already there within the ecosystem and trying to figure it out from there. We have this problem of thinking of depression. My doctor did this when I had to go out of town to visit this doctor. And again, he went through the chart, and there's the things wrong with the brain, the little Pac-Man stuff, and because they look like Pac-Man with the synapses and the serotonin within your brain. The first thing they'll tell you is that there's just something wrong with your brain. There's just something wrong with you. There's a fault with you. Something's not right. We're going to give you this thing, and we're going to help it out. Truth is, and again, people might get very upset with this, that the people that are suffering from depression, this is usually not their problem. There is a small minority, a fraction minority of people that actually literally have something wrong with their brains that are depressed. Most people, when they think about depression, instead of thinking about it as a flaw or a mistake or something is broken, and this is helpful as a magician, see your sadness and your darkness, especially if it's really loud, see it as a sign. See it as, there's things in my life that are obviously not going right. I need to try and figure out what is going on. And I think that a lot of our issues come from this idea that what we do, and this goes across issues of all health, that there's one thing wrong with you, or there's like a couple of symptoms, but there's going to be this one cure. And everybody does make this distinction. Well, if somebody's depressed, they're not getting enough food, and they're not jogging, and they're not physical exercise. These are all wonderful things to help you, right? But there's not just one thing that you can do. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do to try and help yourself to get to a better state of mind. And magic, again, no one spell. But give yourself every day where you're just doing something. And the more positive things that you're doing, they help as well. Another thing that I think a lot of people need to realize is, and this doesn't just go for people that are magically inclined, because of our way of seeing the world as a somewhat mechanistic place, again, we can go into the Cartesian boondoggle where mind and matter are separate. From there, we got the Industrial Revolution, and you've heard this song and dance before. But I see a lot of people now saying things like, it's out of my hands, I can't make a difference, or fuck humanity. I see a general sickness in the world of people who see it doesn't matter what I do, the world is a bad place. That is already a loser script. And I think we need to understand that the models that we are usually given by the time we get out of high school and when we start to become adults sees the world as a meaningless place. We need to understand that a worldview is not a world, right? What we have is a way of looking at the world that seems right to us. Well, the things that you can account for that are only evidence-based or empirically based, the epistemologies that we have at this point are ones based on evidence and explanation. Very few of them are based on experience, on working with things that might be somewhat more subjective. I like to think of the world, and I realize that this is one of those things that it's hard to talk about because you can't just buy a new worldview, or you can't just buy a new ontology, a way of seeing yourself in the world. I go to animism, and especially with the idea of looking at your body and yourself as an ecosystem. Realizing that most of the things that are surrounding you are alive. And people would say, well, of course the vegetables are alive in some way, and if the water, there might be plankton in the water, so I guess it's alive. But the rock, that's not alive. No, I see life everywhere I go. I am surrounded by a constant stream of meaning and agency that each and everything has in the world. And that is a very positive way of coming at life. Our problem, I think, stems from the fact that there is no way that we can show that these things are alive. So it is a bit of a leap of faith. If you talk to a lot of people who are very happy and somewhat content in their lives, I think Maslow, who I talked about in the Colin Wilson episode, These people have peak experiences. A lot of them are very spiritually oriented. And if you talk to, again, more people that are very well adjusted, a lot of them believe in God. A lot of them have some spirituality. What is this? Is this delusional? Seeing something outside of yourself is incredibly important. When I was quitting drinking, I went to about 3-4 months of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was an agnostic Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't like the idea of you have to seek the something higher than yourself. I'd never liked that idea. I had to stop going to Alcoholics Anonymous because they still went through this mechanistic way of seeing life. It's like, well, you're drinking. Well, why are you drinking? Well, drinking is because you're depressed. Well, what made you depressed? Well, this thing happened when I was a child. Okay, and then it just was incredibly linear. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't seeing that there's everything that is around you is causing you discomfort and anguish. It was incredibly one-to-one. But it's not to say that I did not have fantastic experiences at the end. There's one story. I hope I'm not bringing confidence. I will not mention a name. It was an older gentleman. He was talking about drinking. And he was talking about how he started having auditory hallucinations. Then he would start to have, as soon as after he woke up, he would have visual hallucinations. And he talked about how he saw the devil. And he describes the devil. This was when he was at the depths of his alcoholism. And he said he saw the devil. He said the most striking thing about the devil is he had the most patient eyes I've ever seen.
That's amazing.
Yeah. We talked a little bit earlier about a situation where people that are definitely incredibly depressed and they go to the doctor and then the doctor says that I am going to do some very intrusive treatments for your mental illness, something like ECT or electroconvulsive therapy. What they've started to notice is that people show benefits of a better state of mind even before they've had the treatment. It's almost like a strange placebo effect where before they've even begun, they start to notice that people are getting better. The idea of the fact that they have made a commitment that they are going to stick to, that they have the agency to at least make that decision, immediately starts to make them feel better, which is a strange phenomenon to say the least. As an animist and as one of those people that tries to see ecosystems everywhere, I mean, we could talk about the idea of the universe being one giant ecosystem, so it is that one higher thing outside of yourself. Also realize that inside ecosystems exist smaller ecosystems and smaller and smaller and smaller ecosystems, down to us. I shared something on Twitter recently about the fact that our human bodies, most of the DNA and most of the stuff within our body doesn't belong to us. In fact, more than half of us actually doesn't belong to us. We are walking novel ecosystems, and we need to start to treat ourselves in this way. Right. So the idea of just one thing being able to help me doesn't sit very well with me. And this linear mechanical progression is that you have to start to realize what are the elements of your ecosystem that are causing you harm, and what ways that you can go about to help yourself to try and get better. I'm huge into Carl Jung. And he had this idea of what is called the transcendent function. Because when we think we go into therapy or we think we go into treating our depression, that there's going to be that one moment where just, and then it's no longer a problem. The transcendent function doesn't work like that. It basically says that there will be an instance where something happens or you come to an agreement with yourself where suddenly somehow, not suddenly, because sometimes it takes time, where the thing that bothered you doesn't bother you as much. You transcend the problem.
Right.
And this is a far, far better way of thinking about it.
Because it never truly goes away.
No, exactly. So I think the idea of agency, not just within the world around you, and it can be on a sliding scale. We tend to think of agency as, at the very basest level, something like a sunflower following the sun across the sky. That's like a form of animal agency somehow. Well, to the other spectrum is human consciousness. Like, we are conscious human beings. Like, I think, therefore I am. That's some kind of agency. But extending that agency to rivers, to places, to trees, even things that are not alive, rocks, is a very important thing to realize that there is agency all around us at all times. And that we do have agency within our life. when you make the commitment to try and change things, which is where cognitive behavioral therapy comes in, which is not the only answer again. When we start to set up behaviors for ourselves to stick to, that is a very important thing. And this is coming from somebody where I have days where I do not want to get out of bed. But I promise myself, and I fucking stick to it, that I will do something the next day. Mm-hmm. And it's going to better be something positive, and it better be something life-affirming. Now, as far as magic goes, and what magic you can do to make yourself better, and if you want to think that there is something outside of yourself that can help you to get better, the best place to start is with something somewhat familiar and something very personal. I have an ancestral shrine or an ancestral altar. That is something that every day I thank. I thank the ancestors. I thank them for their protection, their aid. I thank them for taking an interest in my life and my work and my flourishing. I ask them that even if they don't understand the things that I do, that they support me and realize that I'm doing it for my good and the good of the world. Even if my ways are not theirs, that they allow me the space to be able to do it. I ask them to protect the coming generations that will come after me within my family and my family that is alive right now. Even if magic is bullshit, even if it doesn't exist and I'm completely wrong and this is all delusional, it is still an incredibly positive and beneficial behavior. And it could be one of the very first processes of what we did. Before philosophy, before religion, we had eschatology, which was the idea of what happens to us after we die. The big question. Something that has been talked about by quite a few occultists, specifically occultists and magicians that work with ancestors. Even the act, if you've never set up an ancestral altar before, even the act of setting it up, it's striking how familiar it is. Mm-hmm. It's almost overly human, the idea to pay respects for the things that came before you and the things that might come after. Right. And again, even if magic is entirely bullshit, and even if you think that the spirits have no interaction in your life, it is such a positive behavior to set up an ancestral altar, and every day you stick to thanking them for the things that you have, for taking an interest in your life. And this might be that whole thinking outside of yourself kind of thing, but this at least grants an agency to something else, and that it also allows you to have the agency for you to be able to interact with something as well. So it's an incredibly important thing, I think. And as far as spells or rituals that you can do to help yourself mentally, this is probably the best that you can do. You can ask for remediation along your family line, because I know a lot of people are feeling a lot of stress about what their ancestors did at this particular moment of 2020. It's incredibly helpful. I can't think of anything better as far as trying to help yourself to get over some kind of mental anguish that you are going through. I don't think it's delusion, even if it's bullshit. It's just beneficial in a therapeutic sense. I don't buy that for 1 second. But even if it is, you are setting up very positive behaviors that step outside of this strange mechanical way that we view the world, that everything is just, it has to be based on evidence. Because we have been interacting with our ancestors for a long period of time. And it's seemingly, in the West, it's just something we've kind of forgotten to do. But when I go down to Mexico, many houses, right. They have shrines. You spend a lot of time in Japan. Yeah. What did they do in Japan, Andre?
Lots of shrines.
Yeah.
Family shrine. Yeah. Of course, Shintoism has a lot to do with things like that, but specifically in the household shrine, you worship your ancestors. Yeah. Your great-grandparents, your grandparents, your husband, your wife, whomever has passed. Yeah. So one of the things that I like to do when I was doing a lot of, other than living there, but traveling there and visiting people, and sometimes people take you in, the first thing I like to do is light incense at their shrine. Yeah. People get surprised, especially as a Westerner, that you want to do that. But because, in a way, I'm thanking them for bringing me here. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's a no-brainer for me. Yeah. Right? I have a shrine at home. Yeah.
Do you actually?
I do. Well, I've sent you a picture.
Oh, that's right. Shrine. That's right. You've got a great story about putting a picture on that shrine. You want to tell that?
Sure, I'll tell that story. Yeah. So I've always had a shrine. I would say it's Japanese inspired, but it's mostly because I dabbled in Buddhism, and I'm a student of history, and I'm a student of Japan, so for 20 years. So what I like to have, and it always made me feel comfortable, is a shrine. Right. Now, what that shrine has changes constantly.
Absolutely.
So I had a shrine when I was living on Massey Street near Trinity Bellwoods, and I had a shrine that was high, very high above my bed, on a weird little shelf that was there. And so a girlfriend of mine at the time, she went to a vintage sale, and she was looking through old photos, and she saw a photo of a woman. It's a very small photo. I would say it's like 2 inches by 3 inches. Right. A very small photo. Mm-hmm. Black and white, 50s, early 60s. And she goes, it had a woman in front of a Japanese temple. Mm-hmm. And the woman in the picture did not look happy, but it was there nonetheless. And she goes, I got this for you. I'm like, oh, cool, great. So I don't know why I did it, but perhaps because I knew this person was probably dead or very old or whatnot. So I go, I'm going to put it on the shrine. Mm-hmm. That night or the night after, I started getting horrible nightmares.
Right.
Awful nightmares.
Right.
Like
vivid.
Some of the worst nightmares I've ever had in my life. Mm-hmm. This happened at least 2 nights in a row. And I remember thinking, okay, what the fuck? What did I do? What's different? Mm-hmm. I knew that I got that gift, and I put it on the altar, so I took it down. That picture, I took it down, and the nightmare stopped. Right. So whatever that is, it happened, and it's definitely something about the way I saw it was energy, spirituality, and also maybe the person in that photo had a horrible trip. And I was like, I don't want to, you know what I mean? So, and I don't want to say that I'm not like yourself. You put a lot of effort into your shrines. And I do too, to a degree, but I think my intention is different.
Sure.
Right? So your intention is very, 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 forgive me, magical.
Yeah, it is a podcast about magic.
But I don't know nomenclature, right? So, but for me, my intention is remembrance.
Right.
It's definitely remembrance. So on my shrine now, I wouldn't say worship, but in tattoo culture and also Japanese culture, and the reason I say tattoo culture first is because this Buddhist figure, his name is Fudo Myo. I have him tattooed on my body in a couple of places. It's a strictly Japanese deity, because you have a lot of crossover from India and China in Japanese Buddhism. But specifically with him, he's very Japanese. Long story short, he's a smiter of desire. Right? Holds a sword and he holds a rope. So I have him in a lot of places. Right. And I collect a lot of stuff when I'm in Japan. I've got a lot of necklaces of all that esoteric Buddhism kind of stuff. So that's what I have. And that's what I connect with at this moment in time. And I always will. Right. But also tchotchkes. I love tchotchkes. I like little darumas and little things I pick up in my travels and when I'm living in that country. So,
Where in the spectrum of epistemologies does your experience with the nightmares, where does that fit? As in evidence, as in explanation, does it fit?
In how I feel?
No, just like it's a simple yes or no question. Do you think
does it fit in just generally speaking?
What's the evidence for the fact that you had those ridiculous nightmares and you put the picture up?
I don't know if I have evidence.
You don't.
I don't.
But you have an experience.
But I have an experience, right?
And it was an incredibly vivid experience.
Well, you know what? And I'll tell you, because you're right. It is all about experience. When I hadn't been in Japan since I had lived there, and so I went back last year. When before pandemic. My goal was to go every year before I eventually, bought a place there. Right. The first thing I did, and this goes back to Fudo, and there's a big temple outside of Tokyo in Narita. You fly in there, called Narita-san. And Narita City, if you ever get to visit, it's beautiful. It's not just an airport. And if you ever want to see documentaries about people did an uprising against the government, it's fantastic. And how government put the boot down, blah, blah, blah. Okay. It's fitting for what's going on now, too. It's a huge temple complex, which is the temple of a lot of famous kabuki actor family. But it's also basically all about Fudo, this character. And I went there and I sat there. And I've been going through a lot of stuff.
Right. Good stuff, bad stuff.
A lot of bad stuff.
Right.
Emotionally bad stuff. And that's always been my thing. Yeah. Emotional wreck a lot of the time. And a very, very emotional person. Since forever.
Very much so. Yeah.
Right. This temple dedicated to Fudo. So I hadn't been there in a while. And it was a place that I go often. Okay. So when I lived in Japan last time, I lived in a prefecture called Tochigi, and it's a way, if you know the geography, it's travel, it's a trip. But I would go as much as I could because it's massive and it's huge and there's so many complexes, and the way the Buddhist temple complexes are amazing because there's like so much to see. Right. If anything, if you know nothing about anything, which is fine because you don't have to know shit to go there and have an experience.
No doubt.
This is what I love about it.
Yeah.
And also one thing, I mean, I'm not a religious man and I'm very against religion in a lot of other ways,
right.
But I will say that what religion can do for you is its architecture and what it shows. And that to me is the most, you don't have to worship or believe, you just be a part of it. So I go there and I sat down. I always have a lot of experiences when I go to temples in Japan. Something nice happens to
Some
me.
would say that they're alive.
Right, no, but I mean like something like I always have good timing.
Yeah.
I always have good time. I remember going one time and I was sleeping a lot around Japan on benches, etc. And I remember someone waking me up and saying, "This is happening now." It was very weird. And this is like the middle of Japan, and I just happened to fall upon a historical meeting of two sects of Japan. The news was there, and I happened to be there to witness it. Right. Stuff like that. Yeah. So Buddhist temples, I resonate very, very much with. Would I call myself a Buddhist? No. But I do have it does vibe with me.
Right.
Okay. So I go into Nadita-san, and I sit there, and they're having a ceremony. Right. Okay. A lot of tourists, a lot of people take your shoes off. I sat there, and and then I wept. I wept for a good 10 minutes. Yeah. I needed a release. Right. And Toronto, if anyone who knows about living in Toronto it's great. It's difficult to find a real release here. Yeah. Right? Everybody's cold. I'm from here. And also I was allowed to be free and to be unburdened by whatever ghost was hanging over me at the time. Emotional ghosts, physical people, etc. Right. And then going there and weeping. I think this goes back to what you're talking about, connecting with magic, in that by doing it, and I was just sitting, but that's still an action. I'm still doing something. Right. And I'm sitting and I'm listening and watching the incense and people chanting, and the tourists go like a cycle, but I sat there rooted to the spot and I wept. And I didn't hide it because I needed it. Yeah. I needed it so fucking bad.
Right. One of the things that was most striking to me about when I started taking medication is that I did become less emotional. Because I was a very emotional person all the time. Right. But I started to realize that my emotions was one of the ways, and probably one of the largest ways, that I navigated the world. And to be able to clearly see those emotions helped me better deal with them, as opposed to just shutting them off. Right. So this idea of, and a lot of the times what we have to realize, and it's an overused statement, but it's very true, is that it's not a bug, it's a feature. I think we have to think of a lot of negative thoughts, specifically for people like you and I that see a darkness quite often. One of the things that magicians, I think, have, specifically ones that don't think that it's all in your head, there's people that say like it's just wayward psychology. One of the powers that we do have, indeed, is a registration that the world and some of the things that happen in the world are certainly strange and weird, and they lack explanations. And some would say that, as a magician, I'm trying to make these things happen almost by desire. Some people have used the word will. I'm going to tell a small story here that I didn't include in my little life story. It was in 2009 or 2010. I haven't been sleeping, also drinking a lot. Working in a restaurant, I wasn't really having a really good time. I remember waking up at around 4 in the morning, and there are voices in my head, and there's about 3 of them. And they're talking, and they're very, very loud, and they're definitely in my head. It's scaring the shit out of me.
Do you know what they're saying?
No. Okay. No, but they're very distinct. There was a guy who sounded like a newscaster. There was a woman that sounded like she was a very joyous, almost like a Walmart greeter. Okay. And then there was like it sounded like an 11-year-old boy. It didn't sound like they were having a conversation with each other, but it almost did. Like one would start talking, and then almost just before they finished, somebody else would start to talk. Right. I had a friend who was working in medicine, and I contacted her because this was quite frightening to me. And this was before this was when I was doing the more Golden Dawn. So I hadn't really done a lot of working with spirits or working with entities outside of myself. I'll just say that. It scared the fuck out of me. I called her. I just basically said, this has happened. She said, you have to go to a psych ward. Wow. I did. And it was good. I mean, they gave me some antipsychotic drugs, which I took for a period of about 7 months or so. But the reason I bring this up is I am now actively trying to conjure entities
Right.
in which sometimes they appear to me visually, as in there's something there in front of me, and that's very infrequently. I would just want people to know I don't see them all the time. But more frequently than that, I can hear them. And some would say, well, Doug, are you just incredibly mentally ill? Like, have you always just been mentally ill your entire life?
And you're somehow triggering that illness.
And you're somehow triggering that illness and whatnot. There is a discernible difference in the way that the sounds that I heard that morning are very different. It was definitely things in my head. Like it had a location. It was inside my head. The stuff that I do now, it's hard to explain. It's almost like it's in my head, but also only because I can hear it because it's outside. It's very, very odd. But have I mentioned that if you're having a really bad time in life, you probably shouldn't do this kind of magic? I'm just going to put that out maybe I should add this as a disclaimer.
Right.
If you're really, really bad and unhappy, you probably shouldn't be doing anything more than thanking ancestors and doing small rituals to, I don't know, Helios or Selene or this kind of thing. But
there's no positive and negative here. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly? Like, so you're saying that if you're having a bad time of it, do something more. I mean, I'm using positive and negative.
Yeah.
Not to say that conjuring demons or angels or whatnot is a negative thing per se.
No.
What you're saying with your disclaimer is that if you're having a hard time, do something.
Or don't do magic.
I see. Because.
For sometimes it's like throwing a bit more fuel on the fire. It is a very...
Because it's physical, correct?
It is physical. Right. And it is also one of those things where until you do enough of it, the line between what is real and isn't gets very blurred. And I think a lot of people, especially if they're starting out with magic and they're starting to have things happen, that line becomes very, very blurred. And you have to get to a point where you realize that it's not a line, it's actually more of a spectrum between what is objective and subjective, and you're somehow playing with that. And that's the beautiful thing about being a magician, is that we already know that there is something odd outside of ourselves. For somebody in I'm not speaking to you specifically, Andre, but for somebody in your case, and I have several friends that are feeling, they're a little bit older. Sorry, you're not old.
It's okay.
They're a little bit older, but they feel somehow rudderless in life. But they're incredibly intelligent people. They grew up within the same way that I grew up, with this strange Cartesian split, mind, matter, never shall the two meet, this crazy dualism. They read everything from Schopenhauer to Kant to Hegel. They're very well versed in philosophy. They're still miserable as fuck. They realize that, at least to them at that point, that life is terminal. Life ends. Yeah. And so they become, as they get older, they become a bit more existential. I think one of the things that I try to do, not as a gateway, because he's an incredibly positive figure, is I try to suggest Colin Wilson, who I talked about in the episode of Colin Wilson. He called his way of acting new existentialism, which is a way in which, hey, guess what? Peak experiences and meaning are incredibly important as to how you live your life and to have a more rounded life. And the more meaning that we have, the better. But meaning is not one of those things you pluck out of the world. You don't just go. In your instance, you don't just go to the temple and you suddenly have meaning. The meaning was already there in that temple. It was you able to somehow connect
100%.
With something there.
I never expect anything.
Yes.
It just happens.
The other thing that's great about Colin Wilson is that he realized that there's shit that we can't explain. He called it Faculty X. For people that are struggling with mental health and magic, and you haven't read Colin Wilson, you have to read Colin Wilson, particularly if you are having problems with the idea of not having agency or not being able to commit to something, because that is entirely what he talks about. He is struggling through what could be the last great philosophical movement, which was existentialism, which is a realization that this life is terminal, which he found incredibly negative. I know everybody would say that existentialism isn't that. It's like, it actually gives you purpose because you realize that you have responsibility to take in your life. I don't think that they went far enough. I think that the sweet, sweet tonic to that is Colin Wilson, who recognizes that, hey, there's certain things we need in life. Yes, life ends, that we know of right now. But there are things that we do that are kind of signposts as to how to be able to focus attention and to focus on things that make things easier for us. But we also need to realize there's something else. There is something else out there, whether that be God, energy, spirits, demons, angels, anything. Resigning to yourself that perhaps you don't know absolutely everything and that not everything has to be explained via some kind of scientific paradigm is very crucial. And it's one of the things that we as magicians hopefully already know and need to lean into a bit more. I would suggest it for a lot of people. When I was going through AA, there were people that I could see that were just holding, because there was most likely some trauma due to religion. Definitely some horrible trauma due to religion. But they also just couldn't see anything beyond what we have now. And when they would say, I've been AA for 14 years. In a lot of ways, that is entirely good, and it is entirely needed. But this idea that it's all mechanical, we do this, I cure the depression, I do the meditation, I eat properly, I get my exercise. There's countless cases of people that have killed themselves, and these might be the people that very well have that brain malfunction that doctors are so easily prescribing this day and age. The hardest thing about commitment, as far as realizing there's a way to help yourself, is to realize that you can't do it on your own. There have been recent treatments done in Europe, of all places. I forget specifically where this is. But they are support groups that aren't supporting you for the thing that they think ails you. What they are doing is that they just want you to come and they want you to create an activity that you can do. It's usually very tactile, and it's usually something like gardening. You can talk with the people while you're there about what's going on in your life if you need to, but they ask you to just focus on being part of a group doing something that involves flourishing. And they're finding ridiculously great results in this respect because we are social creatures, and we find that if we have a tribe or something to connect with other people, that helps them enormously. And they're finding a lot of these people are just realizing that I just get sad every once in a while. I'm a bit lucky because I have a lot of, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn in any way, shape, or form, I'm quite lucky in the sense that I can do a lot of things by myself, and I always have been able to, but in certain things, I realize that I have to reach out to friends, and I have to reach out to fellow people. If you're feeling incredibly hemmed in and terrible, and you're suffering, and there's not just one tribe, but you need to start to figure out if there's a way or something you can do with other people, whether it's going to be a D&D game, which I believe are quite helpful, but this is me talking as somewhat of an animist. Guess what? Nature and growth help immeasurably. Doing something where you can see nature, that is maybe the best thing that you can do. And they found with these groups, the gardening seems to be one of the best ways of doing this. There's a book. I'll recommend it. It's interesting, but it still goes on the whole, it's a mechanical thing where he says that depression is more of a signal. I don't like that. We're occultists. Let's see. Depression is more of a sign.
Right.
But
symptom?
We could call it a confluence of symptoms. It's a bunch of symptoms is basically what it is. There's something else that you need to do, whether find your tribe, whether do more ritual, cognitive behavioral therapy. Remember that you can't just do one thing. You need to do a whole bunch of things to try to get better. And it does take commitment. There's a gentleman by the name of Johann Hari. He wrote a book called Lost Connections. And it's a very good book in some respects. Again, it does have that strange mechanical model. I wish that they didn't have that, but some of the insights that he has are very, very good. There's another book, I believe her name is Jodi Skillicorn. It's called Healing Depression Without Medication. It's also a book that is quite good to realize that she uses the word soul. I get it, but there's some really important tips in there. And there's also, for those of you that are thinking that they have to go the route of taking medication, this might be one of the better books to read to realize that yes, indeed, a lot of medications either they don't do very much or they actually have incredibly deleterious side effects, which I had the worst side effects. I just had the absolute worst. I have to talk about this because I believe it is important. I know several people that are microdosing with things like psilocybin mushrooms. As the years roll by, this is becoming a more viable option for us. At this point, because this is a podcast, I cannot condone, and I can also not say that it is totally useless. But I do know people that psilocybin is maybe the most, and microdosing it in small amounts is the greatest thing that has ever happened to them in their life. If you are in the depths of darkness, do not, under any circumstances, take a heroic dose of any hallucinogen. For the love of God, that is the worst thing you can fucking do. But I would say there are techniques and tricks you can do. Exercise, eating better. We all know these things. That's the thing about this, and which is so incredibly strange, is that if we're going to call it a sign or a signal, where are you going to look for the answers? Chances are you know it already. You know where a ton of my anguish over the last 20 years came from? It was one thing. It was fucking alcohol, right? But it wasn't just alcohol. That was one of the bigger steps that I had to go through. And it was the most apparent one. For the longest time, it can't be alcohol. I'm just lying to myself. No, it's not the alcohol. I know a lot of people, they smoke a lot of weed. People that are very unhealthy smoke a whole lot of cannabis. But all those things, you might want to take a look at maybe cutting that out for a little bit. Or use it as a sacred herb used for rituals. It's not one of those things you do every day to try and tether you to reality. A lot of the times, and specifically with something that you don't think you're addicted to, chances are you're addicted to it. Right. This isn't just with substances. I know a lot of people that could do very well with throwing their TV out of the fucking house. I know a lot of people that would do very well with deleting Instagram and Twitter. And I don't want to be that guy that just says this kind of stuff. But the things you surround yourself with, they definitely have an impact. They certainly do. I remember my psychologist made just a very simple suggestion. He said, Doug, you're listening to a lot of angry music. You might just want to listen to some Bach. And I did. Guess what? Small change. It didn't cure me, but it was just like, So the things I surround myself with, aggressive music, aggressive TV shows, it's not the cause of my anguish, but it definitely doesn't help. It doesn't help.
I don't play video games.
No.
But then during lockdown, a good friend of mine gave me his PS4 to borrow.
Right.
And I've been playing a lot of games that would be considered, I guess, on the violent side, like the Uncharted games.
Right. You kill a lot of people in those
You kill
games.
a lot of. You think about it, and it's like there's a lot of killing.
Yeah.
And then I played Last of Us.
Right.
And that's all killing, and that's brutal killing.
Yeah.
And I walked away, and I finished the games. All the games are done because I've got the time. And I remember thinking, okay, I'll give you an example. You know what? If we have time, I'll give you an example of when it hit me. I mean, no spoilers here. I don't care. If you've never played the game, it doesn't matter to me. But it's called Last of Us. It's a zombie game. Came out in 2014 or 15 or something. And there's an ending scene at the end when the main character kills 3 people that are begging for their life. And you're saving somebody. So you're saving this girl. And I break in. This Joel character breaks in. And they're saying, you come any closer, we're going to hurt her. And he's like, okay. Now, there's a pause. So what I do, as the gamer, I pull up my gun, and I blow his head off.
Okay.
He dies. Then the other 2 cower.
Right.
And I go, okay, boom. That's 2. And the third one, she's like, you're an animal. And I didn't want to kill this third person.
Right.
Keep in mind, so no one takes me out of context. We're talking about a video game.
We are talking about a video game, ladies and gentlemen.
The Last of Us.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's people that have played this game that are listening. And I tried to not shoot this person in the game. So I tried to collect the girl, but it wouldn't let me. Now, there's always a little bit of a delay. So I thought in my head, okay, I guess I have to. So I end this person's life.
Right.
And then I take her, and it lets me take the girl. And I'm thinking, that's when it hit me. I was like, that is horrible. And I understand that this character is very brutal, and it's a brutal time, and you're putting it into context.
Right.
Yet at the same time, I've been in a dark place.
Yeah.
Having done that kind of made me really stop and think and go, I should probably not be playing these games right now. I wasn't cognizant of like it's making me more depressed, but what it was doing was making me more depressed.
Yeah.
And affecting me.
I guarantee you it was making you more depressed.
Right, especially that game. Because that game is just this horrible dystopian.
As great as these things are,
and it's a fantastic game.
And as much as we love our music that's extremely aggressive, and as much as we love, I know you enjoy some really aggressive music.
Very much so. But when I put on jazz, it's a whole different ballgame.
It's a whole different ballgame.
Whole different ballgame.
Yeah. We have to realize that there are certain things that we can do that we can surround ourselves with that are certainly more beneficial than other things.
I will say there's an attraction. Mm-hmm. When you're down and dark...
Why not put on some Morrissey?
Morrissey. Morrissey. Why don't I put on a little bit of some black metal? Why don't I put on a little bit, play a shooting game? Right? Because it's feeding that negative space.
Correct.
And me, totally ignorant, I was like, oh great, PS4, oh great, Uncharted, oh great this, and then after a while, because you have the time, you're playing it day. Yeah. And then you just graduate, and you're like, and did you get to the rock bottom? You're like, I can't do this anymore. I don't know if I can do this anymore.
Because these things, they make us very, they make us happy in some way. They make us happy, and a lot of it is an escape. Mm-hmm. And escape is as fun as it is. If you're trying to get healthy mentally, escaping is one of the worst things you can do. It is such an overused quote, but I'm going to use it anyway. That insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. If you are unhealthy and you are trying to figure out ways in which you need to make yourself better, you do have to step out of your comfort zone. And guess what? Choosing to get better mentally is fucking hard, and in some way it is more painful over a short period of time before you start to get better. And that's really tough because you are cutting out a lot of things that make it hard. The study that I brought up earlier about people having to find these tribes, these groups in which they do gardening, they report that I think a large segment of these people, before they join these groups, like before they walk in the building, they are so scared they projectile vomit. A lot of the times, it's not that they have to be dragged in, but the actual act of making the commitment and doing that change, again, I'm speaking as somebody who hates change, like especially if it's not change that I have brought on myself. I'm getting much better at it. The act of making the commitment in some way is so egregious that it's really hard, and it just gets harder and harder and harder. But these things that we surround ourselves that for the time being make us happy, and yes, they are escape. Sometimes, guys, you just have to put it down, and you do have to do something a little bit different. All of man's problems come from being unable to sit quietly in a room by themselves. Have you ever just sat quietly in a room by yourself? Not like dark room, or not, when you first wake up, but actively taking yourself, getting yourself off the couch or whatever chair, and going into a different room and just sitting there, eyes open, eyes closed. You don't have to meditate or anything, and just what is going on. Just feeling with your whole body, with your mind. It is quite incredible what comes up. And again, because we have this idea that it's about what we throw into the ecosystem that is going to make us better, we don't realize that if we just observe this ecosystem for a little bit, we can start to see the rhythms of how certain things operate. And it is very essential. I think the one thing that I want people to get from this episode more than anything else is to realize that you are not a machine. You are an incredibly novel ecosystem. It is a beautiful thing, and you have to treat it as such. The things that work for somebody else are not going to work for you sometimes. Right? The book that tells you how to get rid of your depression, or the support group that exists to pull you out of your mental illness, does not exist. It doesn't. Not until you write it, or not until you realize that there is something that you need to do to help yourself.
I mean, talk about ecosystems. We're organisms.
Correct.
And as we know, that all organisms take what's in their environment and put it inside of them.
Correct.
Whether there's pollution, whether it's noise, whatever, anything, it becomes a part of you.
Yeah.
And that's so easy to forget.
Right.
Right? And it's like, well, I'm so fucking invincible, but really, you're not. You're not. And you got to watch exactly. It's not just what you eat. It's not just what you listen to. It's just so many things. Who you spend time with, who you talk to, what you read. It's so nuanced.
Yeah.
So
it's novel, as I said.
Yeah.
It is very novel. But I know that each and every one of you, unless you're actually one of those people, because I don't want to discount this, there are people that literally have a malfunction within their brain that definitely need help. And I would never say that don't even bother with, it's called allopathic or osteopathic medicine. Sometimes it's what you need. Absolutely. But if you take some time to sit and listen to that ecosystem for a little bit, do you want to throw something new into that? Or do you want to observe for a little bit and realize, there's things that I can work on? I hate using war terms, especially because war itself is somehow mechanical. Mitch Horowitz, who has a wonderful essay on metaphysics and depression, he talks about how it's kind of like an all-out assault. Whatever you can throw at it, try to. For him, positive thoughts, very important. Positive outlook, any kind of alternate spirituality or system, be it Buddhism, be it anything, just something outside of yourself is also incredibly important. Again, even if magic is bullshit, it is still important. For me, setting up rituals, very important. Specifically for me, ancestors. Absolutely. There's nothing negative. There is nothing negative. Even if it's bullshit, there is nothing negative about thanking the people that came before you and maybe paying attention to those that might come after. If you're like me and you know that they're real and they can actually do things in your life, all the better. But baby steps, right? Absolute baby steps. Mitch Horowitz is also an incredibly interesting fellow as far as people that feel that their life doesn't have a purpose or lacks meaning. Specifically his book, The Miracle Club. He's going to be coming up with a book very soon. I believe it's going to be released July 14th. I might be wrong, but that number just came to me. It's called Miracle Habits, and it's for people that have reached out to him basically saying, like, what can I do on an almost day-to-day basis to help me to be part of this miracle club, to be able to know that there is some kind of desire that I can orient my life towards to be able to fix it beyond just thinking positive thoughts or trying to catch myself when I start to become negative. Mitch is a great teacher as far as this is concerned. He struggles as well. I think a lot of us do. And a lot of us are very cognizant of the fact that we are dealing with something that does not have a seemingly rational, evidence-based system around it. Hopefully some of you know that it is indeed real. And it's a very important distinction to make. But yet again, the book that tells you how to do this doesn't exist, guys. You can choose and read as many books as you want. There's certain information there that might be very helpful. I do think, and the thing that helped me incredibly is the idea of meaning, and to know that meaning is not something that I arrive at. It already exists. It's all around me. The universe is some strange, alive thing, and I need to realize just how alive it is every breath that I take. And it is very important. And I see just utter beauty everywhere. Depression also isn't a competition. And I know a lot of people that would say that I really haven't had that bad of a depression. Short of trying to overdose purposefully, it's true. Not everybody's pain is equal because not everybody's pain is the same. Again, novel ecosystem, no two ecosystems are exactly the same on Earth. Ever. Ever. The fact that a lot of modern medicine tries to treat it this way is, I think, incredibly harmful. And I'm not just railing against the over-prescribing of sometimes very toxic drugs. Yeah, I want everybody to know that there are things you can do. There certainly are. And as far as magic is concerned, there's no spell. I hate to say it. There are things and behaviors that magic grants you that definitely help. What I really want everybody to realize is that you almost do not belong to yourself. You are this ecosystem that I keep saying over and over and over again. There's more not you in your body than actually you. You are a novel ecosystem, and you are worthy of conservation. And you deserve to be here, and we are all made stronger by your presence on this earth, always. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I really do. And I know you guys can do it. Do you have anything to add, Andre?
No, I don't. Your first anniversary episode is probably the heaviest episode you've done.
Definitely.
And that because it's personal.
That's
why I chose this topic.
Yeah. I hope that there wasn't a whole lot of cringe in this episode, but even if there was,
fuck them.
Deal with it.
I don't even fucking care. Cringe. I mean, if you can't sit and listen to someone and talk about something important, then
what's the point?
What's the point? Right? Then you got to look at yourself.
But as far as books I can recommend, besides those like 4 books, guys, Lost Connections is very good. Healing Depression Without Medication, The Miracle Club, and the soon-to-be-released, which I have not read. I have to preface that I have not read The Miracle Habits. Mitch knows what he's talking about, but yes, those are definitely books. They'll be up on the website. Please check them out. Andre, I love you. I care about you. I worry the hell about you.
Oh, thanks.
I really do.
Well, I love you too.
I wish, it's not that I wish, but I'd like to see you lean more into the side that I know you know is there.
Oh yeah. That's the biggest thing that I've been going through in the last 3 months. Free of one shackle.
Yeah.
And the sad part is allowing the pandemic to have freed me of my job.
Right.
And which was a shackle.
Yeah.
So if anyone's listening that was in our business, you know what I'm talking about. Right. And that's on me. It's not the job's fault. It's just me. So allowing myself to enjoy my freedom, be good to myself, be positive to myself, and know that it's a process. And rather than be like, oh, why am I not doing this? Why is this not happening? Oh my God, this has been sitting here for... Anyway, I'm working on it. And that's exactly why I chose this, because I get to see you. Mm-hmm. Because I think the biggest thing that I've been missing, and I'm sure others have been as well, is the human connection. Right. Because it's so easy to be blocked in. And I will say, for most of us that are trying not to succumb to being isolated, right? Because you can succumb to it, and especially when you're have a big head like mine, and you're filled with a lot of thoughts and a lot of regrets and a lot of sadness, right? And that's always going to be there. But also not allowing it to take... the way I think of it is sometimes it's like things trying to crawl into bed with you as you sleep. Right. It's just like these things that you don't want in your life. The only way to fix it is time and patience.
Time and patience, picking up some good habits, getting rid of some other bad habits. Right. And I definitely, I just have to reiterate, you already know the answers usually.
Yeah.
You usually know what's going on.
Which is what causes the depression or that triggers a lot of things, because you're like, I know the fucking answer. The answer's in my head. Mm-hmm. The answer's there the entire time. Mm-hmm. It goes, hello, this is the answer. And like you said, depression is because it's a symptom of something. Yeah. It's multifaceted. This is what like you said, insanity is like, I've been here before. Mm-hmm. I've sat here before. Right. You've witnessed that before. Yeah. I'm tired of it. You get tired of these things, and you start criticizing yourself like, well, if that keeps coming back, why aren't I trying to fix it? What am I afraid of? Well, I guess I'm afraid of success. And I use the word success loosely in so much as that the success is to do the thing that you want to do, right, that maybe you're born to do, or you're that clicks with you. Mm-hmm. Because being a servant, right, doesn't click and resonate with me. Being a boss in my own head and in my world around me, that resonates with me.
I think the closest I ever came through like an AA breakthrough, if there ever was one, was that I was realizing that I wasn't addicted to alcohol. I was addicted to feeling bad about myself. I was really addicted to the fact that I liked to beat myself up. And
it's so satisfying in a perverted way.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of us think that we deserve it. We have a culture that rewards us for feeling bad about ourselves.
But it's also how you grew up. For me, it's how I grew up. Yeah. Right? Like it's instilled in you that you should be doing X, Y, Z, and then you're like, as you get older and you realize that you're the antithesis of X, Y, Z. You're ABC or whatever the fuck you want to say as an analogy, but you're the opposite of how your family is But then you realize that maybe they also have the same problems, because there's a lot of depression in my family, and it's not talked about because that's not what you do. Right. So you're kind of on your own, but you realize that you're more connected with your family than you think you are, especially a certain side of the family. So it's a lot of things. You open up one jar and you open, those babushka dolls.
Russian dolls.
Yeah, well, I don't like saying the word, but
True enough. Andrei's Ukrainian.
Yes. My point is that it's opening, it's opening. So.
Absolutely.
And it's work. It takes work.
It certainly does, and in the kind of work that actually you haven't done before. A lot of people that I know that are struggling with depression, a lot of it comes from poor self-image, a lot of it comes from not feeling worthy, and so the absolute hardest thing to do is to actually make the commitment and to realize that you have an agency in changing it. And that is really, and here's the strange thing about that, is that short of somebody dragging you to one of these groups or dragging you to get better, you're really on your own. And that's the toughest part.
Yeah.
There is no key that can make you suddenly go, I have to do this. It is something that you have to actually figure out how you're going to do it yourself. For me, I got tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
That was it. And I just kept spinning. And why am I just spinning? And I did not want to set up another fucking shrine in front of my door before somebody walks in and finds my dead body.
Yeah.
Waking up to that, I cannot, and this is going to get heavy, I cannot explain the emotion that I had waking up and taking the objects that I built to be the things that I wanted, the first things that I wanted people to see before they came across my lifeless body, and putting them back on the shelf.
Right.
Slowly. The crazy emotions that you go through when you're doing that, it felt like it took days.
Sure.
Absolute days. But at some point, you have to find this actual physical, real physical strength, find that commitment, and to find your agency to try and help yourself. And there's no book that you're going to get that from. That's the hardest part. It really is.
So it takes work.
It takes work.
Yeah.
And that's why magic and mental health is so intrinsically linked, because the more work you do, the better you are. And it's all work. It never stops. And you have to keep working at all times. So that's the show, everybody. One last time. For those of you interested, head to whatmagicisthis.com. There you can find a way to subscribe to my show via iTunes or Google. You know what, guys? If they got podcasts, I'll be there. Also on my webpage, you can find my Twitter account, my Instagram account, Facebook account, because I don't use Facebook very much. If you could try to contact me through Facebook, I'll get to you guys eventually. Speaking of contacting, if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm a very approachable person. A lot of you are doing this recently, and it's wonderful. I love it. Keep them coming. I'm a nice guy. I'm going to give it to you straight, and you might get a longer answer than you expect. Be prepared for that. Also, if you enjoy my podcast, please leave a rating. I love the little star clicky thing that people do, but I like even more, I like words. I'm a reader. I love books. If you write a little review on me, that would be appreciated. Also on my webpage, I've got show notes for each and every episode I do. My show notes for this one are going to be a little bit stranger, but they're definitely something worth checking out. All of the books that I mentioned, I think the 4 books that I mentioned, and some other books will be up on there. Yes, please check out the show notes. Always fantastic. Yeah, that's it. So we got to end the show with the post-show quid pro quo. Andre, are you ready?
I'm ready.
And this is going to be a very easy question for you.
Oh, good.
If you had one genre of music to listen to for the rest of your life.
Oh, that's easy?
It's
No, maybe it is.
If you had one genre of music to listen to for the rest of your life, you could only listen to this genre.
Yeah.
Like, I know there's like subgenres. Yeah. But if one genre to listen to for the rest of your life.
Like a general genre.
Yeah.
It'd be jazz.
It would be jazz.
Yeah.
Why?
Look, I listen to a lot of stuff. And I listen to a lot of heavy music and a lot of punk and hardcore and black metal and death metal and jazz and Japanese enka.
I love hip-hop.
And I love the hip-hop. but I will say it would be jazz because jazz takes me on. And this is just my opinion. Jazz takes me on a journey that those other pieces of music or genres of music do not.
Right.
Now, it will come close to hip hop. Hip hop is pretty close to that, but I would say jazz because there's just so many different variations of it. So many variations of it. Yeah. More so than any of the other, in my opinion, more so than any of the other music genres that I've mentioned. So, yeah, it would definitely be jazz. It's a beautiful form of expression.
Do you have a favorite specific jazz artist, or is it all good? Because for me, it's just like it's all good.
It's all good. I mean, something I'll go to Coltrane and Davis and, Chet Baker. I love Chet Baker. Chet Baker reminds me of me.
You a Duke Ellington fan?
No. The big band stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Not really. Although I don't consider that jazz.
Oh, okay.
Although I'm sure someone would be like, wait a second.
I'll be that guy.
Yeah.
Wait a second.
No, but the big band stuff, I mean, early big band stuff,
Yeah.
Especially in the 1920s and the 10s. But yeah, most definitively, I would say a lot of New York jazz from a certain, the 40s and 50s and 60s.
Love it.
Yeah, fuck, dude. There's just it doesn't have to be, and I don't even have to know who it is. It won't even matter.
No.
So it's on, and it is, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah, I love jazz as well. Andre, I love you to death.
Thanks. Ditto.
And
I appreciate.
This has been some fantastic. Again, I'm so blessed to have you in my life. No. I really am.
Thank you.
We've got some funny stories together, and maybe next year we'll share a few more stories.
I hope so.
And
I hope we have more stories to share,
absolutely.
to just new ones. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure. And
I mean, there's no. I'm happy that. I'm very happy that you're in my life.
Oh.
Again, there's not many people I can speak to and talk to and have a conversation where I never get tired of it.
No.
And I don't feel like I'm being talked at.
Oh, I do talk at you.
Yeah, but I mean, that's all depending on the context.
True enough.
You know me, I'm very opinionated, and I let it happen.
Yeah.
So until some days where I'm like, okay, that's enough. But I don't begrudge you of it.
True.
That's why I know I love you. Because if I did begrudge you, we wouldn't be friends.
It's true. This is very true.
Anyway.
That's the show, everybody. Come on back to What Magic Is This next time. Hopefully next episode won't be as heavy. Just kidding. Guys, this episode was actually fantastic. I think this might be maybe the most important episode I've ever done.
It was necessary for me.
Yeah.
That's why I chose it. I mean, it's apropos because currently I think mental awareness, mental health, it's always, it's shit gets talked about a lot, but no one really talks about it.
No.
You know? Like, your stupid bell campaigns and all this. Yeah, don't appropriate it. Just talking, I think, is the best way to do it. And even if we talk about this all the time, you and I. So people think that we only talk about this during a podcast. Absolutely, this is something we're consistently talking about
all the time.
So,
absolutely.
And if anybody's listening, you got to talk to somebody. Talk to somebody.
Please do.
It's okay to share. It really is.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned that, guys. I should have probably mentioned at the beginning. If you're not feeling great, as in you don't want to be part of this world, you need to talk to somebody immediately. There are so many options. Please,
maybe in the show notes.
Yeah. Oh, there would certainly be some show notes. And please talk to somebody. As I said, the world is better with you in it. It always is. You are an ecosystem worthy of conservation. You really are. And it's fantastic. And with that, that's the end of the show, guys. Come on back to What Magic Is This? We're going to have some more of this magic stuff that y'all love and enjoy. Stay hopeful, stay healthy, and stay luminous. We'll talk at you soon. Bye-bye. Say goodbye, Andre.
Bye.
We'll see you next year.